The Saints, in fact, were not in trouble, and even the Twitter community knows that. In fact, this pregame walk by Dak Prescott was probably his biggest highlight of the day. And meanwhile, we get Derek Carr turning into Demon Carr while he was out there dropping his nuts on the Cowboys for a celebration. Last week we had Derek Carr talking trash to JC Horn. This week we have Derek Carr dropping his nuts on the Cowboys. A completely different dude than what we saw last year. You even had Micah Parsons telling Aaron Andrews pregame that this is the most locked in he's ever been in his career, only for him to end up putting up zeros and doing nothing all game. And all of this because the New Orleans Saints just destroyed the Dallas Cowboys in their home stadium and took over Dallas. The Cowboys went like 18 games in the regular season without losing a home game, and the Saints just snapped that streak and crushed them. Everybody picked the Cowboys to win this game, including myself, but that was obviously wrong and left a chip on the Saints' shoulder. And after the Saints won, Drew Brees chimed in on the predictions because he said that everyone just doesn't learn their lesson. In case you don't remember, he was the only person to pick the Saints when he was working at NBC a few years ago. No one picked the Saints this week, and now he's saying no one has learned their lesson. And leading up to this week, we had Trayvon Diggs talking trash about Chris Olave and CeeDee Lamb taking jabs at Marshawn Lattimore. And all of that just to get 40 points dropped on them. And this is just evidence and more proof that it wasn't just the fact that the Saints played the CFL Panthers. The Saints are actually good this season. Now, I had my doubts and concerns going into the season about the Saints. And even last week after a good win versus the Panthers, I was like, I need to see it versus the Cowboys and the Eagles. I need to see them do it again. And man, did they do it again. And after this beatdown of the Cowboys, a probably Super Bowl caliber or contending team, at least for the playoffs, I'm bought back in now. I talked all crap and trash about this team. I thought they're going to be mid again. I had them winning 8 games. That's changed. I'm bought in. I think this team is going to be good and make a possible deep playoff run as a contender. I mean, the last time they scored 40 plus points in back-to-back weeks was 2018 versus the Bengals and the Eagles. And the last time they scored 40 plus points in the first 2 weeks of a season was the 2009 season, which they went to the Super Bowl. More evidence and proof that this team may be special if they continue to keep this up and Clint Kubiak keeps cooking and Dennis Allen keeps doing his thing on defense. And the way the Saints were able to pull off these 2 wins the last 2 weeks all starts with Clint Kubiak in the offense. They scored 44 points this week and 47 last week, but both of them were led by star running back Alvin Kamara, who I think is officially back, and he's probably going to win Offensive Player of the Week. Hey, Tom Brady, how many touchdowns did Alvin Kamara have? I forgot. That's right, he had 4 touchdowns. He now has 5 touchdowns on the year, only 2 games into the season. It took him about till week 13 of last season until he got to 5 touchdowns. More proof that Pete Carmichael is the devil for what he did to Alvin Kamara. And it wasn't that Kamara was washed, it was that Pete Carmichael is just straight up evil. Alvin Kamara on the day had 115 rushing yards, 65 receiving yards, and 4 total touchdowns. He is now 1 game closer to tying Christian McCaffrey for the most games with 100 yards from scrimmage. And given the fact that McCaffrey is on IR, I believe, that's going to make this number and stat a lot easier for Kamara to reach and to break. Now, I already made a video about how Alvin Kamara is officially back. He looks like his old self, but we did get some stupid comments about how it's just the Panthers and we need to calm down, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, right. Kamara is officially back. Took a 56-yard screen to the house. And shout out to Cesar Ruiz staying stride for stride with Kamara all the way to the end zone. We also saw how ridiculous Alvin Kamara's balance is, and so did Colin Saunders, saying Kamara's balance is the best he's ever seen on that 1 touchdown run where he just popped up out of nowhere and ended up in the end zone. I think it's official that the Saints need to pay Alvin Kamara like right now before his asking price gets way too high. And Kamara earlier in the offseason said he didn't feel like what he was asking for wasn't fair. He said he believes it's fair for both him and the front office, but obviously the front office feels differently. Well, I bet that number is pretty fair right now, and they better get it done before that number goes up. Not only was Alvin Kamara impressive though, he just led the way. The whole offense was impressive against the Dallas Cowboys. The Saints starting offense from last week to this week had 15 straight scoring drives, touchdowns, and field goals. And it finally ended when Derek Carr threw an interception on a little bit of an overthrow of a pass, but it doesn't really matter when you're up 44-16. And it also didn't matter because Derek Carr had himself quite a day versus the Dallas Cowboys as well. And when I ask you this, I want you to actually think, how many completions do you think Derek Carr completed today? I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He had 11 completions. 11. It feels like he had a lot more completions, but it was just that they were so productive in what they did that they didn't really need to throw the ball or complete the passes anymore. That 70-yard touchdown pass he had to Rashid Shaheed, I cannot lie, was an absolute dime. And he said post-game that it wasn't supposed to go to him, but Rashid Shaheed, his speed and his quickness is so different that he just took the shot and it ended up working out. And it was a one-play drive. It was very quick. Derek Carr did an excellent job finding Shaheed deep. And Derek Carr has looked really good the last 2 games. And starting to think I might need to make that Derek Carr apology video, and I'm okay making it. I'll eat up my own words on this one. But not only did Alvin Kamara and Derek Carr have good days, but they couldn't have had good days without the offensive line. Shout out to the offensive line. Talise Fuaga was questionable to play with back tightness. He went out there, balled out. Trevor Penning was a huge concern. We will now refer to him as Kingpin. He shut down Micah Parsons. I only noticed Micah on like 1, maybe 2 plays. Trevor Penning had a key block on one of the touchdown plays. The Saints offensive line deserves a lot of props, not only for keeping Derek Carr basically clean the whole game, but allowing rushing lanes for the Saints to run the ball and get almost 200 rushing yards on the day. I don't know the total amount of pressures they had on Derek Carr, but at one point near the end of the 3rd quarter, there's a graphic put on the screen and the Cowboys only had about 3 pressures on the day. That is an insanely good job by the offensive line. Also, props to Clint Kubiak and the Saints offense for getting the ball out quick and not allowing Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence to become factors in this game. Something that's crazy too is that the Saints wide receivers weren't a huge factor in this game as well. Shaheed obviously had the big play and Olave had a few nice catches, but neither of them had 100 yards. Neither of them had like 10 reception games, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. Neither of them dominated. They just did enough to help the Saints get by, which just shows that this truly is a run-first team that relies on the running backs. But we can't forget the fact that Trayvon Diggs was talking crap about Chris Olave earlier this week, saying that he's not basically worried about Chris Olave and what he brings to the table.
What challenge does Chris Olave bring?
One more time?
What challenges does Chris Olave bring as a receiver?
This is a trick question.
This is a trick question.
He could play.
And he ended up having 80 yards while Rashid Shaheed had 90 yards. Both of them had good games. They just weren't super involved, which is fine. The Saints were able to run the ball effectively and win the game. From an offensive standpoint, this is practically almost as perfect as a game could get, just like last week. And as for the defense, Dennis Allen had his guys ready. And I'd say it was a little bit of a question mark considering that Marshawn Lattimore was questionable and he was eventually ruled out before the game. This is a concern because CeeDee Lamb is a menace. The dude had 1,700 yards last year. The dude is probably a top 3 receiver in the NFL. And I was concerned that he was going to be cooking Paulson Adebo. And we did see that on that touchdown play. Cooked Adebo even though he was holding, spun out of the 2 defenders and took it to the house. It wasn't looking good. But that was about it. That was all that CeeDee Lamb really did, and the Saints had a plan to shut them down. And they brought the Lamb to the slaughter, especially Will Harris, who laid the boom on CeeDee Lamb on this play. Shout out to Ryan Clark noticing the Saints defense and secondary. He tweeted out the Saints should walk into each stadium with seatbelts. They call man and strap folks without their number 1 corner in Marshawn Lattimore. They were able to basically keep CeeDee Lamb under 100 yards and manage him and not allow him to break out. It was obvious CeeDee Lamb wasn't going to go for all zeros, but to keep him basically contained was a huge win and was a huge part as to why the Saints won. Can't forget about the 2 interceptions that Paulson Adebo and Tyrann Mathieu both came up with. Paulson Adebo so close to getting that pick 6, his first one of his career, and Tyrann Mathieu just continues to make plays and continues to build up a Hall of Fame resume for Canton in a few years. They were also very physical. Will Harris had a big hit. Demario Davis was all over the field laying the boom. Even Ryan Clark said that we need to talk more about Demario Davis. Kool-Aid McKinstry, Alontae Taylor were being physical and making great tackles. Tyrann Mathieu with a huge hit. They came ready to play and only allowed 1 touchdown on the day. They allowed the Cowboys to get past midfield. They bent but didn't break and only allowed 1 touchdown against a really good offense. They did a good job stopping the run versus the Cowboys, not allowing them to really have any versatility on the offense and made them one-dimensional. I will say this though, I wasn't a huge fan of the Saints pass rush. I know they had like 2.5 sacks or 3 sacks, something like that. But I thought overall, from a consistency standpoint, I did not like the defensive pass rush and the fact that they weren't really able to pressure Dak Prescott consistently. But it didn't matter because the secondary was clamping up back there. I will shout out Brian Brzee for forcing that fumble. Hopefully they count it as a sack, and Carl Granderson had about 8 pressures in a sack and a half. So they got sacks, it just wasn't as consistent as one would have hoped. The Saints overall though did their job. The players showed up and performed. The coaches did a good job coaching up their players. There's no other way to put it. Now, from a performance standpoint, there's really no negatives, but there are some downsides to this game. Taysom Hill left the game with a chest injury, and Dennis Allen said that it took him to a hospital just out of precautionary to make sure everything was okay. We'll make sure to keep you all updated with that, but Taysom Hill is being evaluated at a hospital. Dennis Allen revealed that Marshawn Lattimore was trying to play, but he kept him out himself because he doesn't want to have him injured long term just for this game. Just keep him out, keep him precautionary, and it was more of his decision as opposed to whether or not Lattimore could or couldn't play. And everything seems to be okay with Lattimore post-game when everyone was celebrating. He was on the Instagram live dancing and involved and happy the team won, so I don't think there's going to be really too many issues there. Tyrann Mathieu got injured with a heel injury but ended up back in the game, so maybe not too many concerns there. And one last thing on the inactives list, wide receiver A.T. Perry was not active today and the Saints were still able to perform. Let's not forget, people were saying this dude was going to be the next Michael Thomas and help replace him and be better than him. I don't remember Michael Thomas ever being a healthy inactive or a wide receiver 3. So maybe people were hyping up A.T. Perry way too much because he was a healthy inactive. And undrafted rookie receiver Mason Tipton, who didn't even play in the preseason, was active over him. Those are my only downsides, and negatives were the injuries and A.T. Perry not being active. But overall though, another near perfect game from the Saints, this time versus a Super Bowl playoff caliber team in their own stadium instead of a Canadian Football League in the Carolina Panthers. And now they'll get ready to host the Philadelphia Eagles next week at home and look to go 3-0 for the first time since 2013. But for now, the Saints and the fans need to enjoy this win. Subscribe to my channel, Cash Sports, for more daily NFL content. Have a good one. Peace.